In this episode, we will discuss the realities of adjuncting after grad school and its parallels to gig work.
This is The Hidden Critique, where we discuss art, race, and higher education at the intersection of an MFA. I'm Marlon Tobias, pronoun he, him.
And I'm Krystle and Lemonias, pronouns she, her.
Welcome to our show.
It's interesting because we're talking about all the things that is going on the instructor side and the adjunct side, right? So this adjunct is faced with insecurity as far as guaranteed work, minimal pay, travel, right? Commuting not just to one institution, but in many cases, multiple institutions to try to make ends meet. And you think with all of this burden on the instructor's shoulders, how is this impacting the students, right?
Yes.
And that takes me to a quote that I saw in an article called Barely Getting By that talks in detail about the statistics of adjuncts in comparison to full-time professors. And the quote states, students are not receiving the best possible education when the instructor in front of them is struggling to decide whether to buy food or medicine, and students' futures are jeopardized when an inspiring professor who could provide a recommendation or further mentorship is let go as soon as the academic term ends. This report continues to secure the economic and social prosperity and justice that our members, our students, and our nation deserve. We must address the problems afflicting higher education. So there isn't a disparity just in K through 12 education, but this is also illustrating a disparity within the higher education. And it's interesting, this quote, it reminds me of because I like to think of myself as, a pretty good teacher, pretty good instructor. And I would have students, especially toward the end of the semester, that would ask me for recommendations. One school I was working at asked me if I could do an independent study with them. And I had to tell them that, unfortunately, I'm just an adjunct. So I don't think I am at the ranking or in the position to allow this, right?
To support them in that capacity.
Yeah, to support them in that capacity. I can't, or I have to do more digging or research or asking if I can serve in somewhat of a advisory role, or if an adjunct can do that before I can just guarantee that answer. But at the same rate, I'm not being paid enough to even if I wanted to, I have to consider, am I going to get compensated for this equitably? And most times it's not, because it's not in the department or the school's budget or whatever. So these are things that we have to consider in its totality. Yes, this is a disparity for these instructors who really a lot of the times want to get a full-time tenure track position, but can't because there's minimal available. But also, how is this impacting the students and their quality of education that they're paying for? So now we're in higher ed and we're talking about that these students are paying for this instruction, and they're relying on these instructors to teach them quality career training in order to be successful after they graduate. So it makes you, it also begs the question, like, what is the incentive for adjuncts to build connections and community to support students and the building of departments if there's no guarantee that they'll even be able to work there the next semester?
Right.
Questions?
Something, yes. Very important question. And so there is something else that I pulled out from this Inside Higher Ed article. It shared nearly 25% of adjunct faculty members rely on public assistance, and 40% struggle to cover basic household expenses to support what you shared earlier. This is a report from the American Federation of Teachers. And then it goes on to say that nearly a third of the 3,000 adjuncts surveyed for the report earned less than $25,000 a year, that puts them below the federal poverty line. And for a family of four, another third of the respondents make less than $50,000 a year. And then it shares a little bit more that per course, it varies, but most are making between $2,000 to $7,000 per course. And about 53% of these respondents make less than $3,500 per course. Asked about equitable compensation, more than half said that they were paid at least $5,000 per course. And it goes on to describe these workers or adjunct workers as an army of temps.
An army of temps. But it wasn't always that way, right?
Yeah.
The disparity wasn't always there entirely, because there's another statistic that I saw that in 1975, 30% of college faculty were part-time. And by 2011, 51% of college faculty were part-time, and another 19% were non-tenure track full-time employees. So in other words, 70% were contingent faculty, a broad classification that includes all non-tenure track faculty, whether they work full-time or part-time. So in responding to an army of temps, like the numbers are showing that instructors are needed to teach these classes.
Right.
And these institutions are in a lot of ways heavily relying on these adjunct instructors to teach these courses. However, we're not being compensated for how much we're needed.
I think to also get a little bit broader to what is happening that is causing all of this. I don't have an article to actually support what I have come to understand, but I know it's information that I have read in the past. There is less funding going to states that is in regards to higher education. So individuals that are currently paying more for tuition, not only because the states are less funded in higher ed, the states are giving less funding to higher ed, but in addition to that, universities are also increasing across the nation. So you have these two things happening at the same time. We have costs of education increasing and then less support from the actual government for educating people. And then we have a third pillar, if you will, is like there is also inflation on everything. And that's not to say that universities can't do anything about this, because you have universities that have huge endowments just kind of sitting around, just chilling in accounts, not really doing much. But then you have also people on the boards of these universities that are business people, and they are focusing more on profits and the growth of these endowments than necessarily the sharing out of funds to support students. So I do think there is power within universities' hands to be able to do more, specifically undergraduate students, because from what I've been reading, the majority of the research has been focusing on how much debt undergraduate students are leaving college with. And then grad school is another thing, which is also exceptionally expensive. But, the bulk of the debt is coming from undergraduate students. And really, it's almost, to me, it's like it feels as if universities should be really really closely looking at the endowment and seeing how much funding can they really divvy out to students to get a little bit more equitable in this clear issue that's happening. Because if students are graduating with these enormous, debt already in their pocketbooks, how are they then to really contribute as educators, as whatever it is that they decide to do? And specifically then, if they have debt as an undergraduate and then incur debt as a graduate student and then choose to go an adjunct, Jesus Christ, where does it end? So I would really employ universities to look closely at how they can support, students' finances by offering more scholarships.
Yeah. All great discussions, but what we're going to do now is we are going to bring on a guest. Her name is Carina. She is a fellow artist and a fellow art educator. So she's also been on the adjuncting train, and we're going to talk a little bit about her experience as well in regards to what educating on the collegiate level has been for her and what adjuncting has looked like for her throughout her career. So yeah, let's go ahead and bring her on. All right, welcome, Carina.
Hi, thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you for joining us on the show and talk about something very important, especially for artists, which is a form of employment and working as you pursue your artistic pursuits of becoming an actual professional artist, right? There are options beyond that and outside of that you can do tangentially to still make a living and still pay your bills, or try to, right? So we're talking about adjuncting. And you have a lot of experience with adjuncting, right? So before getting started, just giving us a brief overview of how many years you've been outside of grad school and doing this, trying to figure this whole thing out.
I graduated from my MFA program in 2013. So, wow.
That's almost 10 years. You've been in this game for 10 years. Yes.
Oh man, I feel
time flies, right?
No, yeah, time flies. Time flies.
Definitely.
I've met a lot of great people in the process. I've learned a lot of lessons. I've failed. I've succeeded. It's been a journey. But yeah, 10 years.
I love it. Well, before we get into the nitty gritty, because mental health is important in life, especially when you're living the artist entrepreneur lifestyle, I want to begin with our question, which is, Carina, how is your heart?
My heart is heavy because I'm losing family members. And so just also having that, the weight of seeing one generation pass on and then knowing that we have to step up to kind of carry that next torch. It's kind of heavy. It's a little bit to deal with now. So that's where I am. I hate to bring it down, but it's an honest answer.
It's life. I think that's reflective of you to be so transparent. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. Definitely can relate in losses. And I think that also just speaks to where we are at collectively, because you're a millennial, Carina. So us millennials, we're getting to that age now where we do have to step up in leadership within a lot of our families because of our elders, which are now our parents, are leaving us. So there's a lot that goes into that process, or just aging, right? And I think this is also a time in our lives collectively where we're starting to really understand the meaning of mortality and looking at life in different perspectives, both in really uplifting ways, but also some sad ways, because that means that those people who we looked up to are on their way out. So thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that to us, right? Chris, how is your heart?
My heart is feeling, oh man, it's a lot happening in it. It's up and down. It's feeling some sorrow, but also some happiness and some gratefulness, but a little bit of grief. So yeah, it's complicated right now. There's a lot happening in the world and a lot happening closer to home. So just moving through all of these feelings and allowing them to be while still living and being productive in ways that are not metrics that are not based on capitalism fully. Trying to not make that lead, but trying to, still think of self and manage self in all of the mess that is life currently. So yeah, it's complicated. Like my heart is complicated. How is your heart, Marlon?
I can kind of relate. I would say my heart is, though the closest word I can think of is kind of erratic right now. A lot is happening in my life all at once. Good problems to have, because a lot of it is associated with settling in. I mentioned this earlier, but I had just recently moved from Florida to Chicago about 7 or 8 months ago. And for me, most of my life has been on the East Coast, and now I'm in the Midwest. So there's a shift that goes with that. I've had to rebuild my network and rebuild sources of employment, and also rebuild my artist network. And for someone that had just graduated a little over a year ago, for a lot of people that could be kind of jolting and jarring. So for me right now, I've been doing a lot of groundwork and trying to really cultivate relationships and start relationships and just build momentum. And now it's kind of getting to a place where a lot of things are happening, which is good, but that means that my calendar is filling up by the minute, right? So just trying to organize all that and still really massage those relationships and take advantage of opportunities, but also still leaving time to actually, do the artist thing, which is being in my studio and working. So, I kind of feel like I'm being pulled in a lot of directions, but I am also confident that it will create a really nice landing into where I want to be. So yeah. So I'm kind of back and forth. Right. My heart is back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about the reason why we're all here today, and really get into the nitty-gritty of the conversation. But I also want to gauge your journey as well, Carina. So I want to start with you being an artist, right? To be a person of color, in particular, a Black person, and in your case, a Black woman, art is not always the first choice. And sometimes it's not the most recommended choice by our parents, right? So I want to hear a little bit about your backstory, about what drove you to pursue art as a career.
Yeah, sure. So I I was blessed enough to have art throughout most of my education, childhood, in elementary school all the way up through high school. And in high school, I remember finding out as a freshman that I could go on field trips if I was, to take art seriously and take up that next level. So I did, and I kept pushing myself and did the AP art courses, studio courses. And I took my senior year to visit my cousin while she was at an art school in the city. And I was like completely sold on the fact that art could be something that I could do with my life.
Which
and find a
city? Which
career
city are
with
you
it.
referring to? Because we're in like
Oh,
three different. Yeah.
she was in an art school in Atlanta at the time. And she let me stay the week in her apartment in the middle of Midtown, meet her art friends and everything, and stayed on her futon. I don't even think she was supposed to have a futon in her college dorm room. It was like all the things that was amazing to see and experience as a high school student. And to think that that could be something I could do as a career was moving.
Wow.
I also enjoyed think I also enjoyed helping my art teacher. Since I was in AP classes, I could come in on those off times and help out. So I was taking like an advanced ceramics course, but I was also helping the early ceramic students. And so it was nice to engage with freshmen and teach them some of the methods for making a pot or whatever, and just thinking about myself in that role. And so it really kind of laid the foundation for me. I knew that I wanted to go to an HBCU, but I set out to still make art my major once I was there. So that really drove me and pushed me. And like you said, my parents did ask, "Are you sure you want to pursue art?" I was like, "Well, why not? I mean, my cousin's doing it, why not?"
Mm-hmm.
And I did. She's on a totally different path and more of the applied arts and graphic design, where I was
Okay.
more interested in the fine, painting, drawing, sculpture, and such.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was. We went two different ways, but it did come up with like making sure that I would be able to make money. And I was like, well, I have teachers who are teaching college, so they're fine. I had teachers in high school, I had to have made a living. And the fact that I wanted to base my interest in art as a teacher is what I guess kind of padded and gave the confidence that they needed that I would be okay and as a career path, because
Mm-hmm.
both of them came from, were raised by teachers. So they know that, okay, teachers, they can make a living. They're okay. So they were hoping that I would be okay. I don't
There
know.
is hope.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I know you are very influenced, as you mentioned just a little bit about your HBCU experience and how that set you up in ways for getting your MFA. And just to kind of bridge us to that story about the MFA experience, tell us a bit about your HBCU undergrad education.
It was beautiful in the ways that I feel like it's best said that I became who I am. Like I was able to feed and find my identity at the time, and in a way that I don't know, I can't say it wouldn't have happened that if I would have gone to a PWI, but I think that I would have missed something if I had,
Mm.
attended an HBCU. And then I chose to attend a school with my best friend and with,
Wow.
and it ended up making friends while I was there, making lifelong friends, people that I could never see myself without, being in company with, right? They're good people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that fed me and continues to feed me to this day. And so it's life changing. When thinking about the art aspect, I think that I had teachers that invested in their students in a way that I hadn't seen in high school. Like I had good teachers in high school, yes, but I had teachers that had another level of care in place as well. So much so where when I got to college, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a high school art teacher. I want to be a college art teacher. I like the way that they're able to engage with us. They're having conversations. We're talking about world affairs. We're talking about arts and culture. We're talking about art in a way that I've never seen before. And I want to be that person to someone else. And that really fed me as well. So I again, I don't know if that would have happened if I would have, gone to a different school, but it fed me in a way that shaped my life and shaped the way that I thought about my career.
And let me tell you, that HBCU network is strong. We be looking at, I mean, we have our own, and this is coming from a fellow HBCU graduate. We do have our inner kind of, not conflicts, but like competitions, but collectively we in this thing together. So
Exactly.
you are my HBCU sister. We're also fraternity and sorority family as well.
Yeah,
So
always.
love it. I love it. I love my fellow HBCU grads.
Yeah.
So this is a history that I don't know much about, but I love to watch. I love to see it.
Thank you. Yeah. It's beautiful. Like
Amazing.
it's one that you don't even think, you know about going in, you hear about, but once you are in it and it's like, I'm in New York and I'm finding people that are connecting me just because we all went to nice.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
tell me about your preparing for your, going to get an MFA, and just how was that experience while you were there? I know it's loaded, but in terms of like all that you would have been learning, and maybe even the things that you had to manage socially around your work, but share with us how did you do that, embark on that?
I was one of those, like I said, I knew that I wanted to teach college. And I remember having a conversation with my teachers, like, about how to teach at the college level. And they were like, well, you need an MFA. Don't get an MA because the MA, it's a master's, but it's not going to do anything. You're still going to have to go back and get your MFA. That was what their words were at the time, and in a very short way. But I didn't know what in the world I was doing. I felt like I was, I was leading myself, but I made it happen. I applied to two schools, got into one of them, and it was one that, again, changed my life in the ways that I'm thinking about. Like the art school that I ended up attending, I found a community there, and that helped. Once I was actually in the program, at first I felt like I was like a fish out of water. I didn't know how to maneuver. I didn't have the network of friends anymore. I didn't have not just in my program, but also in the school. I just didn't. I was in the city, living at home, commuting to my program. Also context. I graduated and went straight into an MFA program. But before I didn't do 4 years, I did 5 at my HBCU because I would have graduated right in that tail, like a year after the economic crisis. I would have graduated in 2009. And I hadn't applied to any MFA programs. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember talking to people who were coming out with music degrees, and they were like, if you can stay in until you can get into a school. And so I did. I took up a minor, turned major because I had a free ride. I was on a Hope scholarship. And so I took up another major in order to stay and complete it. Ended up not completing that second quote unquote major, but I then applied to my MFA program, got into my MFA program. So that brings me to a school in Atlanta that I ended up attending for my MFA. And it was, like I said, I felt like I was a fish out of water at first because I didn't have the community. And then I didn't see art the same way before that school was telling me that I should have seen art. And so I had to also learn what was required of me as an MFA student. So not only was I learning the materials, the ways of maneuvering as an MFA student, but also trying to understand myself in the larger world of what art is and what an artist is, what they're supposed to do, and how am I supposed to show up. And then on top of that, there's this element of race and like, okay, so what is my work actually? What can I say with my work? What should I say? And what does that feel like? There were several dynamics that came up, and they were very subtle, and like so subtle where I don't think that other people would notice it, but I, as a Black woman, noticed them.
I have a quick interjecting question. As far as your MFA program, how many Black students were there during your tenure?
Okay. So when I came in, there were 2 Black students.
Is that including you or 2 additional?
2 additional. So 2 men.
Okay.
And me when I came in. And this is another, I knew about the ways that people, the ways that culture shows up as a Black person and generations show up. I knew that. But I didn't know that until I got into that program where it's like, okay, he's Black and he's making this type of work, and he's Black and he's making this type of work. So where do I fit in that conversation? But it wasn't that simple. There's one person is talking about things that are native to their country, and another person is talking about art from a generational perspective and how the art world looked for him at his time in his generation of art making. And so it's like, okay, so I think I was 22-year-old. What does my work look like? What does it mean for me, and how do I show up? Now there ended up being one other Black woman coming to I was in a sculpture program. I forgot to add that, but coming into my sculpture program, but she was also coming from, she already had she was pursuing a master's and then also took up a second master's in sculpture. But her first master was in like photography.
Okay.
So she had already kind of been around and kind of got,
Wasn't her first rodeo.
She knew her school. It wasn't her first rodeo. So she was new. She wasn't new to this. She was true to this. So, so I really didn't know. And I remember, it's funny because I asked a classmate, I remember going back to my HBCU and talking about, I would love to have a community there and encouraging another classmate to come up with me. And they started the program as well. And so it felt almost like it was about to start making sense. But I think that there was still something missing and it didn't quite click and feel right. I was probably one wrong decision or one right decision away from not continuing that program. But
wow. At what point in that program did you feel that way? Year 1, year 2?
Year 1. I think year 2 is where I started meeting artists that it had either finished at that school or they were finishing at the school. And so they themselves had already started this like art collective. And I, jumped on right at the beginning and was learning from them. And so this collective was made up of people that were not only from my college, but also from the community that had been teaching and working in schools around it within the greater Atlanta area as well. So it was very important for me to have that community. It was it changed my trajectory.
So that community is what encouraged you to keep going, you would say then?
I think so, because they began to help me form the language that I needed to understand what I was, not what I was going to say, but understand what my work meant in context to the art world in order to situate it, right? I knew that my work would always in some ways be connected to my family, my understanding of education, so that those are the things that were important to me. And that always is a through line for all of my work and all of my research as a 6-year doctoral student now. So, but at the time, I needed to understand visually where does my work situate itself, but then also socially, culturally, honestly, how to be honest as an artist as well. So I needed that group, it was another element that I wouldn't have gotten in a institution. Well, I didn't get in an institution rather.
And that feels like, I mean, Chris and I can definitely relate to that in our experience of having to outsource for understanding and inspiration and motivation. Started out with just me and Chris, and then Chris took the leap of actually reaching out to other institutional aspects or other departments to also help build more of a concise language and meaning out of what she was doing. And then I followed her lead. So definitely can relate to having to kind of stretch out, right? Or reach out outside the bounds of the art department in order to get what you need to get. So thank you for that. And I want to, of course, pivot to our main topic, which is adjuncting, right? So if you can tell us about the adjuncting jobs that you've had after grad school, or I guess before starting with there, when did you start adjuncting? Did you have the opportunity to adjunct or to teach during grad school? Was that a component of your program, or did your adjuncting journey start after grad school?
Yeah, so for my program, no. So we just had TA or internship requirements. And so I sat in on, did that with people that I knew that were teaching, some people from that collective, some people that had already graduated, and connections that I made through other artists. But
So
when it was,
just to clarify, when you say
sure,
TA, so you were specifically working with a professor in their class that they were teaching. So you were just literally assisting that teacher or that
correct,
professor. Okay, got it.
correct. Yeah, I didn't, I might have led, trying to fuzzily remember. I think I led one class. We had to lead one class or something, one lesson. But other than that, it was fully just that teacher's course. And I just had to take notes and, fill in where I needed to, talk with students. And so it gives me a chance to get my feet wet with understanding like the underside of teaching and some of those relational dynamics as well. But
Okay.
when it comes to me actually receiving the an adjunct position, I thank God had a cousin that was like, you need to start applying in January for jobs come the end of the year, if not next
Mhm.
year, to like apply early. And so I was applying the last semester of my MFA. I finished my MFA August 2013. And I remember moving out of my apartment because I didn't get a job. I was teaching art classes locally at a art school, teaching children, teaching adults courses here and there. But I remember getting the email maybe in October for an appointment in that next January, so January of 2014. And like I said, I moved out of the city, moved back with my parents because I didn't have a job that I could take care of myself with yet. But I began adjuncting with a college that was an hour and a half from my parents' house.
Wow.
Wow.
And
One way. That's a
one way,
one-way commute.
right? And you know, that's with traffic too. So Atlanta traffic is off the chain, but that's with traffic. So I think maybe an hour 15 without. And
And how many
so
times did you have to go in to teach there?
sure, the first year I taught three courses, and they were all in person, and so I had to go in twice a week. Luckily, they were, if not all in the same day, I think, or one class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and two classes Mondays and Wednesdays, or something like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a crazy commute, crazy schedule. I thought that it could be something sooner than it was. And then I happened to meet some other adjuncts at the same school on different campuses. And they were like, no, good. It's good that you got the job. In about 10 years, you'll probably get offered a full-time
Jesus
position. I said, 10 years.
Christ.
And
Lord
they said it
have
went like,
mercy. I know.
they said it was a
Lord
full,
God.
right. And they were like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You got to pay your dues. It's fine. And I was like, how do you all perceive time versus how do I perceive time? I'm like, 10 years, I could be doing a whole lot more in 10 years. And it's funny, I guess 10 years ago, right? Like I've done significantly more than I would be just sitting there waiting on a full-time position at that one school. So that's a whole conversation in itself. But that's how I was introduced into the adjunct kind of world a little bit from through that one particular school. I worked there, and I think I did a year and a half before I was like, yeah, this ain't working for me. I need something to shake. I need something to happen fast and quickly. Still involved deeply with the art collective that I was telling you all about earlier. And then we went to an artist talk in New York, and it was a guy that was in that artist collective that was at in a doctoral program at one of the schools there, the school that I happen to be at right now. And he was like, Carina, you should come join this program. You'll be great. You're already teaching. You have the experience. It's going to be awesome. Just come on up here. You're ready. And I said, no, I'm not ready. And I decided, I had already been teaching for 2 years or so, and I was ready, but I thought I wasn't. But what I did was, from that trip, with me and with it in my mind that I would try to go to possibly get a doctorate, because the jobs that I was looking for, the full-time jobs I was looking for, were telling me that I would need a doctorate or some type of equivalent. If it wasn't art history, it had to be another PhD of some sort. And I was like, okay, I can't adjunct for the rest of my life. I don't have 10 years to just make $6,000 a semester. I need a real job. So I decided
I need a real job.
I need a real job. So after that trip, okay, let me
Yeah.
tell you about the craziness that is me. After that trip, I applied to more adjunct positions,
Uh-huh.
and I received all of the ones that I applied to, because there wasn't a lot. I mean, I think one of them, no, I did. I applied to 3, and one came back, but there was an adjunct pool, and they were doing something crazy. And I also had to keep in mind that since I was teaching 3 courses at the particular school that I was in, the university system of Georgia, you can't teach this is when you have to pull in politics and all that. So because
Talk about it.
the Healthcare Act was, came up,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't, they didn't want to pay you if you were working more than so many courses.
Mm-hmm.
And before that happened, adjuncts could work all they wanted to.
Right.
I knew people that were getting pimped. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's a good word.
No, you can say what you got.
They were getting pimped, but they were making money. Like, they were able to earn a living.
Yeah.
But they weren't getting the benefits that they should.
No benefits.
But they were,
yeah.
So it was catch-22. Because again, we're still on that tail end of the economic crisis. There aren't that many jobs out there.
Right.
So the university system of Georgia was like, you can only work 6 hours in its system. So since I was getting 6 hours at one school, I had to find another system to work within. So
another state?
No system. So I was at the university
within
system. Mm-hmm. So inside of the state of Georgia. So that's why.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that it wasn't a lot of jobs that I can apply to within the same system. I had to look into other systems. So I ended up getting I had a job in the university system of Georgia. I had a job in the technical, I can't remember the word, the technical colleges level. And then I found a job within the community college level. So that's the only way that I was able to get 3 different schools to adjunct at. And
that is a lot of finessing.
Yeah. So in one semester, what's the most amount of classes that you were teaching or that you ended up teaching?
Throughout those 3 systems.
Throughout those 3 systems, yes.
So, okay, it's a lot of parts to it. So the community college, the particular college that I was working at, that was on a community college system, they were on quarters. So, I might have been teaching 2 classes, right?
That is so mind-boggling. Because the quarter system, because my partner, his job works under a quarter system, and the quarter system is completely different than the semester system, and the calendar itself is completely different. So now for you, how you had to make ends meet is you had to work throughout 3 different university systems in the state, which means a minimum of 3 schools, right? And now you have to throw in the fact that you're working on different calendars, which is, I mean, just teaching a lot of classes is mind-boggling enough. But now you have to consider, breaks and like that. That impacts the entire curriculum, your entire syllabus. That's insane.
On top of that, it was awful. I mean, I had to do it, and you said to make ends meet. I was not making ends meet.
Wow.
I wasn't making ends meet. I was not making
3
ends meet.
That ain't right. That ain't right.
3 systems, 2 calendars, and
I wasn't making ends meet.
and how long did that go for?
I would put my whole business out there, but it wasn't a lot of money. So what I had to do, and because again, I didn't think I was
Well,
ready.
not the money, but like, how long did you have to? Were you doing this
So
until you transitioned to New York? Yeah.
that's so my end goal one of the goals at the time was to get to New York, get to this program that could
Right.
hopefully save my life in some way, so I could get one job and not
Right.
4.
Uh-huh.
But so I also, while working at 3 different colleges on 4 different campuses, I took up an MA in business design and arts leadership. So
Wow.
I was like, okay, I have the studio practice, I have the studio MFA. Now I need this. It's the equivalent, like my degree is the equivalent of art administration. So I was like, I need to get, if I can't work as a teacher, I was like, I gave myself a timeline. I was like, if I don't get into this program in a year, 2 years, however long, if I don't get in this program in 2 years, I am going to either start teaching K-12 because I was still my goal was higher ed. My goal was higher ed. So if I can't teach higher ed, I'm either going to teach K-12 or I'm going to go into the administrative umbrella of either higher ed or, museums or some type of institution. That I was just trying to figure out a way into the arts
Yeah.
and be able to actually make ends meet. But okay, so I'm this adjunct. I'm a student. I'm teaching on 4 different campuses, 3 different colleges. But then I also have like the monkey wrench that comes in where my classes are doing well and they're filling up, but the full-time professor that is on some of those campuses, their classes aren't doing well. So they take my entire course and give it to the full-time faculty member. So the day before,
What?
one semester, the day before, like, I want to say the day before, let me be nicer. The Friday before the semester started, this woman, the chair, had to email me. I regret to have to send this email, but we have to give your classes away. So I went from having 3, I think I had 3 courses. They took all 3 of my courses and gave it to somebody else because I'm an adjunct. And so I thought that,
oh my God, your contract is not really valid until the semester starts. So up until the day the class actually starts, your contract can be null and void, essentially.
Wow.
The precarity of that is just insane.
Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like and that happened a couple of times working at that first school.
That was not an isolated incident. That was
the most drastic.
Common thing.
It would have been, they'll snatch your classes, and that's why I was like, I need one job. And I saw like the first 2 semesters of me working there, it was very consistent. I had 3 classes, so I was like, okay, I'm making X dollars. If I get about one other job, one other adjunct position, I can do this. Okay. And that's per semester. Okay. I might be able to start getting on my feet and thinking about, what something else could look like. I still would have been hustling, but I thought I could see the end of the tunnel. But that was only good for a year. After that, it started getting like crapshoot. I didn't know if I was going to have 1 class, 3 classes, or what. And so that's around the time where I was like, okay, I have to make some changes in my goals in my career. So the answer to the first question is how many classes that I teach. It ranged from 4 to 5 classes a semester. Yeah.
Wow.
The technical system and the community system, they were the most reliable. They because they didn't have full-time faculty in those roles, and so
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. As I'm listening to you, I am hearing a lot of similarities in adjunct professor roles as in gig work, doing like
Uber.
Instacart, Uber, like you name them. Do you think, like, what are you seeing those similarities, and what similarities would you draw is there in terms of how professor work or professorship is becoming so similar to gig work?
It's a hard question to answer because I agree to a length. Like I do think that it can feel like gig work, but then I also have seen it to become something tangible for other people.
Yeah.
It just is. It's about right time, right place, right school, right all the things. It's a lot of factors that go into it. Where it works for some people. Some people just want that flexibility of being an adjunct, and it works for their schedule, while others are like, no, I need some stability, and this is what I want. I'm gonna grind it out. Because they don't want it. Just depends. I think it's a personality trait too, or need.
Well, I would say it's a personality trait, and also depending on the subject matter that they're teaching, because there are adjuncts that I know that they teach really niche subjects and they get paid appropriately, and they're able to make a living wage adjuncting as compared to being a full-time professor. As a matter of fact, the particular friend that I'm referring to, they actually had a full-time position, and they saw that they were making more adjuncting than being in a full-time professor position. And they also talked about the flexibility. It actually worked out for them. But what I feel like I'm seeing within art departments, or when we're talking about teaching art, that's not as much of a reality. It's very kind of 50-50, kind of like it's almost like you kind of have to gamble in order to kind of make things work. So from in my sense, looking at adjuncting, especially when you think about teaching art on the higher ed level, it is feeling a little bit like gig work. Like I'm gonna do a little bit here, and then I'm gonna do a little bit here, and I'm gonna do a little bit here, and hopefully I can pay half of a quarter of a bill. So
right. It's a lot of factors. Like I think, like I know, like you said, I know some people that like it. They like to grind out with just having the flexibility. But it depends. I need something a little more stable. And but as a student right now, I'm adjuncting again. I swore I would never do it, but I found myself doing it, and it gives me the flexibility that I need now. With again I was teaching hybrid courses before, which is the beauty of having my adjunct positions at the time. But now post not post pandemic, but where we are in the pandemic now, I have that flexibility to still be able to be at home and have my day-to-day schedule, and then also get some money while teaching. So yeah, like you said, it is gig work. It is, but it depends on how people look at that gig work and whether or not it's works for them.
Right. Absolutely. And so I guess that I'm now curious a little bit more about when it comes to some of those benefits that are missing from the benefit supports that are missing from a full-time position as an adjunct. What are some of those things that, based on how you've talked about, you would like more stability? What are you missing in terms of stability when it comes to benefits that adjuncting is not providing you?
Again, the healthcare was never there. So again, the healthcare marketplace opened up, and I was able to afford insurance because it was $30-$40 in Georgia at the time, or whatever. I had a base level. I was able to afford that, where before I wasn't able to afford healthcare. And then, so definitely healthcare. I don't know if, again, it depends on the person, but for me, I'll speak make sure it's understood. It's my experience. I was missing consistency. I didn't know what next semester would look like because I was juggling 3 schools.
Yeah.
And so I had to beg and plead that this school didn't overlap my class with that school, then overlap my class with the other school. And so it was, and then, depending on who your supervisor was, whether or not they cared enough to keep that in mind. I had great advisors or supervisors. And then I had some that they weren't supervisors, but felt like they wanted to be in control and they weren't nice sometimes. So I had a good, not a good mix, but I had a mix. But like I said, just having the flexibility, having the peace of mind to know that I will have at the end of the year X amount of dollars, and I don't have to hustle for it. I don't have to drive 2 hours to work. Because I didn't ask.
Please talk about the commute too, because I don't think we need to equate gas to these expenses, especially
we have not.
Yeah, we're talking about you teaching at one point 4 different schools under 3 different systems. One of them you said was an hour and a half away, one way.
4 campuses.
4 campuses. So also, talk to us about your commute. what did a weekly or daily commute look like for you?
It was a commute that again had me saying I would never do it. So my commute was crazy. So looking at the map of Georgia, I had one school. The first school was going towards Augusta, so it was an hour and a half, hour 15, going towards Augusta. The other job was an hour and a half, hour 15, going towards Alabama. And so one day I might work. I mean, it might be the same day. At the beginning of the day, I might.
The same day.
Yeah, but I would drive all the way across the state.
The state.
Yeah, that's happened too. And then so the other 2, they were a little more local. Okay, so one was in Covington, one was in Carrollton, one was in Douglasville, one was in Fairburn. So one time I had to go from Fairburn to Carrollton, and from, so I've had to do all of the back roads and figuring out how to make it all happen in one day, because.
So that is sounding like 3 to 4 hours on the road
of
each
just
day.
Driving.
Of just driving.
Of driving. Yeah. And so audiobooks became my friend. It was like the online courses, YouTube. That's when I really started to lean into what I could listen to and learn about on there. But yeah, I never saw myself driving that much, but I was on the road more than I would have liked. Just to make, and again, I wasn't even making ends meet. I saw those adjunct positions at that time in my career as a means to just get teaching experience. If I was being told my first year that I need to work for 10 years as an adjunct to prove that I'm this teacher, I thought that, well, okay, I would have TA'd for free. Now this is not for free. I'm getting paid. This is just a paid internship. That's how I tried to justify it. And so I was starting to look at adjuncting as this way for me to get the experience that I needed for me to get the full-time job eventually. And I mean, I got the teaching experience, I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about my students. I learned about, the geography and how the students in those particular towns may think about their artwork and how they see themselves as artists and professionals. And then what they need, they might not have wanted to connect themselves to the city in any way, even though, the art world tells you that you need to be connected to a hub, a large hub, and you think about yourself as this particular artist. But it's also like I had to learn and take a step back with understanding, okay, I shouldn't, like others, teach my students to fit into this art world. I need to understand the art world that they are trying in hubs that they're trying to create for themselves.
Okay.
I love that insight. That's a beautiful insight.
Thank you. Yeah,
Wow.
and it really helped me. And then when I moved up to New York, and I was just like listening to some of the conversations, I was like, that's some of the ways that they were approaching education and thinking about our education. I found limiting when considering the diversity that is across the U.S., let alone the diversity within a state, within a city, urban, suburban, how people are thinking about themselves and associating themselves as artists. Yeah, I think about that.
Wow, that's amazing. Now it makes me think about, with all this time that you have invested in gaining that experience, gaining that insight and knowledge, how are you then balancing a studio practice on top of adjuncting? And then you also were doing another master's. Like, how are you doing all of this?
Because I do want to say this, and this is something that you put me on, Chris, is that schools or art departments, when looking for full-time professors, they're not just considering your teaching experience, but they're also looking at your CV and your exhibition record. So you're adjuncting to build experience teaching, but you also need to, in tandem, make sure that you're also building your art career. So yeah, to Chris's question, like, what does that look like for you?
Right. So what again helped me is having artist communities. So I told you I was in one collective, and they try to exhibit at least twice a year or so. But then I was also in an HBCU art collective or organization, and they hold themselves to exhibiting as well. And in the middle of all that, I was like the secretary at one point, serving on the board. I was doing too much, but I was I was learning a lot.
So you were in that thing.
I was trying to.
You was in it.
Again, networks in relationships, building relationships. And so I met great teachers. They were full-time tenured faculty at HBCUs across the state of Georgia, across the country, period. And so learning from them, listening to them, and then exhibiting where I could with them as well. So that having those networks that created space to exhibit encouraged me to have artwork prepared for those shows. And that is what kept me honest and kept me grounded in that way. I can't lie that once I, started doing more, my practice slipped a little bit. I felt I didn't, and graduating from my MFA program as well, I needed a break, and I didn't get a break because I went straight into working. I went straight into working a lot of jobs and doing a lot of things, because also in the mix, I forgot, I told you all a little bit, I was teaching at a local art school with children and adults. And so I was doing that all the way up. I was working there and adjuncting all the way up until I found the rest of the adjunct position. So I was still trying to do, I had two jobs. I never not had two jobs, I feel. And it's a practice that I've kind of kept up today. And I don't necessarily think it's healthy, but I'm doing it just to stay afloat. And yeah. But because of that, I do feel my art practice kind of slipping. But I'm also immersing myself back into the collectives, into the groups, into the communities that I need to keep me grounded. So that's what my art practice is looking like now.
Wow. So, I mean, it seems like my takeaway to that is be connected to a network of artists, some sort of collective or community that can encourage you to stay in the studio making in some capacity, because you have deadlines to meet to at least show within this group and to share within this group. That keeps you accountable to your studio practice.
I think so. I think that helps me. Some people might have, they might want to work a little bit more in isolation and can stay true to their practice. But for me, at that time in my life, that's what I need.
Very cool. Very cool. And I guess it's a matter of in our closing of this conversation, like how do you see the experiences that you've had adjuncting, and the experience that you have working in these communities, how does it add up to where you are now and what you are moving forward to in the coming months or years, like however you're looking at your timeline and trajectory for your PhD program and just all the things that you have that you want to do career wise?
So for me, thinking about all of it together and how it relates, I wouldn't have the perspective that I do, like I've talked about earlier, with relating and thinking about the student as in relation to who they are, where they're from, their personal journey, who's informing them. How in my journey, I'm learning from not only friends, but I'm learning from colleagues. I'm learning from understanding and looking at my family dynamic and how education impacts them and the way that I form my values, and then looking at all these layers of what makes this artist and what makes this person. I have found that to be equally a theme in approaching teaching and thinking about myself as an educator and working with students and giving them the time and space to be the full artist that they need. I also have been realistic with myself. Like, I was grateful for the opportunities to start as this adjunct teacher who is teaching art appreciation courses, like the entry level courses to all art programs, and getting to the point where I was teaching college level studio art courses. But then also taking this step and sitting with myself long enough to say, okay, do I really want to do that? Or am I now interested in how people are learning and thinking about reaching students and how educators are working with one another or working with students and ways to enhance a student's understanding of their work? That has been a theme and has been one of the core motivators right now for me, and thinking about my next steps in my career path, and noticing that I don't know if I truly want to be a studio professor. I think that, there are those that do that and they do it well, and because they have their studio practice to feed, their studio practice, their studio experience, their art making experience, exhibition experience, all there to feed the way that they teach and educate students on, say, painting, drawing, or sculpture, what have you. But I'm not sure if that's where I want to be. I don't think that is the journey that I want right now. I think maybe in a couple of years, should my studio practice take up in a way that I think would benefit a student at a level that I want to, teach, then I will go back into being a studio professor or, educator. But for now, I'm interested in something a little different, and finding my way within the art world in a way that I didn't see myself before. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's a beautiful journey of realization and finding what fits for you rather than fitting yourself into a peg.
Now, in closing though, outside of work, right? Because you have shared that you work and you have a history of working. But and even it's funny because there's this misconception that if you're an artist, you're always in this place and you're always getting fueled, and art is what nourishes you and feeds you. But the reality is, a lot of the time, art is work, and you have to find things outside of the art making to fuel you and nourish you and kind of help you decompress, right? So what are you doing outside of paid labor or work that nourishes you and that feeds you? And if sleep is one, because you work, Carina, so if sleep is that thing, it is okay. because we believe in rest over here at the Hidden Critique. So
I love it. I have had to make Netflix a thing again. Like I've had to like take up watching TV and decompressing. Like I don't think I had that there before. I was one of those. I went into college thinking that I was going to be just an elite person. I was never going to take a TV there, and I was just going to just study all the time and just go out and hang out with friends where I needed to, and then come back and study. Yeah, right. That never really happened because we were always doing something else. But by the time I grew up, I still kind of made social media distant and made watching TV distant. But now I'm digging back into it and relaxing in that way. I'm also I'm finding myself back active in my sorority. Oh my God.
All right.
Wow.
You know?
Okay.
Which is good and fun and exhausting and exciting and all the things. But I'm still building relationships, and I think that is something fun for me.
Can we
too.
give a shout out to the sorority? Can we do a shout
sure.
out?
Yes, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
My sorors, as a member of Phi Beta Sigma, so she's my sister. She's my HBCU sister and my Greek sister.
Hey, blue and white all day.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, and because I didn't go into the fact that I moved to New York and felt homesick and had to learn, how to make a community and find a community, and my sorority was a big part of that, and finding people there, and then also finding good classmates to hang out with and go to museums with. So socializing has been a place for me to decompress from work and just be excited about art in a way that I wasn't, I hadn't been in a while.
Wow.
Do you still visit museums?
Yeah, I still visit museums. I haven't gone to any in the last couple of weeks. I went to the Whitney for something. See, I can't even remember. I'm working too much, but yeah. I went to the art fair. So, they had the art fair.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago in September. So.
Oh, you were there. I was there too.
What?
Yeah. Okay. Now I know. When I'm in New York, I gotta hit you up.
Please do. I need to get out and just see people and hang out. I would love to spend time. I appreciate it.
All right. Yes, we'll do.
Well, thank you again, Carina, for taking out the time to talk to us and really just give the reality of the perspective of what it means to be an adjunct in 2023. And what it really just all encompasses and takes to make a living, right? So thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your energy. And I admire you. And even now, after hearing your story, I admire you even more. I encourage you as a fellow artist, keep making time to make, and keep making room in your brain, even though capitalism tries to really take a lot from it. Please continue to make room in your brain to dream and to imagine and to continue feeding those creative juices and those creative outlets, because we need your work and we need your perspective in this world.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot, and I've learned so much from both of you. So thank you for having me and taking time to hear my story.
Of course.
Wonderful.
Now we're at the point of the show where we want to hear from you, the listeners. Join us on Discord, the link found in our show description, to share your thoughts on this question. For current adjunct instructors, how many classes have you found yourself teaching to earn a livable wage?
Thank you for listening to our episode. The Hidden Critique is produced and hosted by us, Krystle and Lemonias and Marlon Tobias. Episodes are edited by Kirsten Pettifor. Original music composed by Cesar Presa.
If you like the show, you can review and rate this podcast via Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube page.
For exclusive bonus content, subscribe to our Patreon. at The Hidden Critique.
Or join the Hidden Critiques Discord page to engage directly with us, the host, and build community with fellow listeners.